I'm not a person who makes scenes. I've never sent back a meal at a restaurant, never raised my voice in an argument, never once in my 24 years of life asked for anything I didn't already know I could get by myself. That's just who I am. Or maybe it's who I had to become. I'm still figuring out which one is true. My name is Sloane. Sloane Abernethy. And before I tell you what happened the day I walked across that stage to get my college diploma, I need you to understand something. I know how these stories can sound from the outside. Bitter daughter. Ungrateful kid who blew up a decent family over hurt feelings. I used to be afraid that's what people would see if I ever said any of this out loud. But I'm not afraid of that anymore. Because I've learned there's a difference between keeping the peace and letting people rewrite history, and for a long time, I was doing the wrong one. I grew up in Beaumont, Texas, in a 2-story house, with a brick mailbox and a wind chime on the porch, that my mother hung there, because she saw one at a neighbor's, and wanted people to think she was the kind of woman who had wind chimes. That's the cleanest way I know to describe my mother, Cheryl. Everything about our life was for the outside version. The Christmas cards. The church directory photo. The way she'd talk about her daughters at book club. Always in a particular order. Always starting with my sister. My sister Jenna is 3 years younger than me. She's the one people always noticed first, in that way some people just have, where they walk into a room and the room tilts slightly toward them. Jenna wasn't mean about it. I want to be fair about that. She didn't steal my thunder on purpose, but my mother handed it to her every single time. Both hands, with a bow on top, and Jenna accepted it the way you accept things when you've never been told to do otherwise. My father, Doug, worked in industrial equipment sales and traveled 3 weeks out of every month. When he was home, he was the kind of dad who sat in the recliner with a beer and called it being present. He wasn't cruel. He just wasn't particularly paying attention, and that absence of attention landed differently on me than it did on Jenna. Because at least when he looked at Jenna, he looked. I was the one who made straight A's and didn't need help. I was the one who figured things out before anyone had to explain them. Teachers liked me. I was responsible. And I learned early that responsible kids don't get celebrated. They get trusted with harder things and left to manage. I started working at 16, hostessing at a Tex-Mex restaurant on Route 90, folding menus and smiling at people waiting 40 minutes for a table. I saved almost everything. I had a reason to. By the time I was a junior in high school, I already knew that the plan my parents had for my future was mostly just a plan for Genna's, and that I would need to fund my own way out. Not because anyone said that. They would have denied it completely, but I watched where the money went, where the attention went, where the excitement went, and I just started doing the math. I got into the nursing program at University of Houston. Full application, competitive admission. Not an easy thing to get into. I found out in the spring of my senior year, on a Tuesday afternoon. Standing in the parking lot of the restaurant before my shift, reading the email twice on a cracked phone screen to make sure I was reading it right. I sat in my car for a few minutes. There was no one to call. I went inside and rolled silverware for 4 hours. My parents said congratulations in the way people say it when they already knew you'd be fine. No dinner out, no announcement at church. My mother said, "That's great, Sloane," and went back to planning Jenna's Sweet 16, which was apparently a dinner dance situation that required 3 months of logistics and a custom backdrop from an Etsy shop in Nashville. I paid for my first 2 semesters mostly on my own. Financial aid helped, Pell Grant covered some, and I made up the difference with shifts at a campus coffee shop, where I learned to make lavender lattes at 6 in the morning for pre-med students who needed something to believe in. I called home on Sundays. My mother gave me updates about Jenna's volleyball season, her homecoming dress, her possible interest in cosmetology school. I gave updates about my coursework and she said, in the way that meant she was also doing something else. I didn't make a thing of it. That's what I kept telling myself. I was building my own life. I didn't need their version of support. I had a study group that met in the nursing building on Wednesday nights, and a roommate named Iris, who taught me how to make actual grocery, store meals instead of living on dining hall pasta, and a clinical supervisor in my second year, who pulled me aside after a particularly hard shift and said, "You're going to be a really good nurse, Sloane. You have the right instincts." I held on to that for weeks. By the time graduation arrived, I had a 3.8 GPA and a job offer already signed, a position in the pediatric unit at a hospital in Houston. I'd done the whole thing. 4 years, clinicals, boards prep, the licensing exam I took on a rainy Thursday in March and passed on the first try. My hands shook the whole way through. I sat in my car afterward and cried, just for a minute, the quiet kind. Because there was nobody waiting outside for me and I didn't want anyone to see. Graduation was on a Saturday in May. I got 4 tickets. I asked my parents and Jenna to come, and they said they would. I want to be careful here, because even now, even after everything, I want to be precise about what happened. Not dramatic, just precise. I arrived at the arena 2 hours early, because I had to be with my cohort for lineup and processional. I texted my mother to tell her where the family seating section was, sent a pin, everything. She replied with a thumbs up emoji. The ceremony started at 10. By the time we were lined up, I was somewhere in the middle of about 300 nursing graduates, all of us in those flat caps with the navy blue gowns. And I was looking out at the crowd the way you do, that kind of scanning you can't help, looking for a face you know. I spotted them before my name was called. My parents and Jenna, seated near the middle of the section. My mother was taking pictures. I noticed that because the flash was visible even from a distance. She was taking pictures and I thought, okay, she's getting ready. They called my name, Sloane Marie Abernethy. 4 years. Every early shift and late shift, every clinical rotation. Every night I studied for an exam by the light of my phone because my roommate was asleep and I didn't want to wake her. I walked across that stage. I shook the dean's hand. I turned toward where my family was sitting, and I smiled the way you smile when you want someone to see you. My mother had her phone up. She was pointing it at Jenna. Jenna had stood up and was waving at someone across the section, one of the other families I think, and my mother was filming it. A little video of my sister waving and laughing, while I stood on the stage getting my nursing degree. I kept walking. I got to the end of the stage and stepped down, and found my seat again, and I just sat there with my diploma cover on my lap and stared at the name of the person in front of me, on the back of their gown. I told myself I was overreacting. She probably got a photo before I looked over. Maybe she got both. I talked myself through it the whole way through the rest of the ceremony. Like I was managing a difficult patient. Slow and steady. Don't escalate. The reception afterward was in the lobby. I found my family near the coffee station. My mother hugged me and said, "You did it!" in a bright, event voice kind of way. My father shook my hand and said, "Proud of you, kid," and looked over his shoulder at the crowd like he was checking for someone he knew. Jenna gave me a real hug. I'll give her that, and said she liked my cap tassel. And then my mother took out her phone and said, "Okay, let's get some pictures," and spent the next 15 minutes arranging and taking photos of Jenna in various configurations. Jenna alone. Jenna with my mother. Jenna and my father. Jenna holding a balloon from the balloon vendor by the entrance. I was in exactly 2 of the photos, both times standing slightly to the side while my mother told Jenna to move in closer to the frame. I'm a nurse now. I've learned to read a room, to read a body, to know what someone is not saying. I stood in that lobby in my graduation gown on the day I became a registered nurse, and I understood that I was background. My mother did not get a single photograph of me alone. I said nothing that day. We went to lunch at a barbecue place my father picked because he said he knew the owner, which turned out to not be true, or at least nobody there knew him back. I ordered the brisket. I asked for the check before they brought dessert, because I said I had to get back and start packing my clinical materials for return. Nobody argued. My mother said the food was dry, which it wasn't. My father left a 15% tip. I slipped an extra 10 on the table after they walked out because I used to do this job, and I believe in not being the table that ruins someone's Saturday. That night in my apartment, I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. I looked at the diploma I'd set on my desk, still in the cover. I took it out and looked at it. Sloane Marie Abernethy, Bachelor of Science in Nursing. I propped it against my lamp and made myself actually look at it. I had done this, by myself, with my own money and my own stubborn, inconvenient, desperate belief that I was worth betting on, even when no one else was placing that bet. I let myself cry that night. I didn't make it pretty or contained like I usually did. I just cried for a while, for the 16-year-old version of me rolling silverware and saving tips. For every Sunday phone call I'd talked myself through. For every graduation rehearsal I walked through alone. And then I stopped, because I'm practical about things, and I made a cup of tea and watched a procedural drama on my laptop until I fell asleep. I started my job 3 weeks later, pediatric unit, day shift, which is both the best and most exhausting thing a person can choose. Kids are honest in a way adults forget how to be. A 7-year-old with a broken arm will tell you exactly how it feels, and exactly what they think about the splint, and exactly what they want for lunch without any of the performance. I found I was very good at listening without needing anything back. My mother called in August. I was in my car in the hospital parking garage after a double shift, and I almost didn't pick up, but I did, because I still picked up, because old habits are the last thing to go. She called to tell me that Jenna had been accepted to an esthetician program she'd been applying to, and that they were so thrilled, and that they were throwing her a little party on Labor Day weekend. And was I coming home? I sat with that for a moment. Not angry. Just very, very tired. I said I would try to make it work. I already knew I wasn't going. A few weeks later, something happened that I hadn't anticipated. My hospital had a system for employee benefits enrollment, and there was a section about tax dependents. When I filed my own taxes for the year, I discovered that my parents had claimed me as a dependent on their federal return. I was 22 years old. I had been financially independent since 18, had my own lease, my own bank account, had filed my own taxes separately for 3 years. Their claiming me was not just incorrect. It created a serious problem with my return and flagged my account for review with the IRS. I found out through my HR benefits coordinator, a steady and competent woman who walked me through what was happening without making me feel stupid. She helped me understand what I'd need to gather. I spent 6 weeks pulling together lease agreements, bank records, pay stubs going back 2 years, notarized statements from my old landlord in Houston. I had to file a paper amendment and write a formal explanation letter. I filed a dispute. I won. I got my refund. But I lost an entire fall's worth of sleep and mental stillness doing it. I never asked my parents directly. I thought about it. I had the phone in my hand more than once. But I already knew how that conversation would go. My mother would say she thought it was still allowed, that she didn't realize that I was making her feel terrible over a paperwork thing. My father would say I was making a mountain of it, and by the end, somehow, I'd be the one apologizing for being upset that they had filed inaccurate federal tax documents with my name and social security number on them. So I fixed it myself. I didn't say a word. I went back to work and picked up a Saturday shift and used the extra pay to take Iris out for dinner, to thank her for listening to me panic about it for a month. By the time spring came, I had started doing something I hadn't planned on. I'd been keeping a journal since nursing school, just for myself, a way of processing the things that happened in clinical that I couldn't talk about publicly. I'd been writing in it more, not about patients, about my family, about the graduation, about the tax situation, about all the smaller moments that had accumulated over a lifetime into something I didn't have a word for until I started writing it down, and the word turned out to be grief. I wrote about it until I filled a notebook, then I transferred some of it, carefully, to a blog I set up on a free platform late one night when I couldn't sleep. I didn't use last names, I didn't tag anyone. I just wrote honestly about what it's like to grow up in a family where one child is the sun and you're the thing the sun is too bright to illuminate, about what it costs you, quietly and over time, about what it looks like to build a life alone and have the people who were supposed to be your foundation show up on graduation day and spend it photographing your sister. I published one post, then another. I didn't tell anyone. By the time I'd posted 6 or 7 entries, I had emails in my inbox from women I'd never met. Nurses and teachers and accountants, and a woman in Oregon who said she printed out one of my posts and mailed it to her best friend because she couldn't find the words herself. A woman who had gone to her own law school graduation with an empty family section. A woman who said she read my post about the graduation photographs and had to pull over on the interstate because she was crying too hard to drive safely. I answered every single one. I'm not sure I've ever felt more useful. A producer from a podcast about family estrangement and adult children reached out in the fall. We talked for almost 2 hours. She was kind and direct, and had obviously done her own version of what I'd done. We talked about what it means to be a child in a family that doesn't see you, and what happens to that child when they grow up and stop waiting. The episode came out in October. My aunt texted me 3 days later. She'd sent a screenshot of a Facebook post. My mother had written something public about how people always only hear one version of a story, and how some children turn their backs on perfectly good families, and how she had always done her best. I read it twice. I thought about responding. I had a lot I could have said, specific and documented things, but, I realized, sitting with that screenshot in my quiet apartment, with my cat Miso sleeping on the heating vent in the corner, that I didn't want to win that argument. I had already built the thing my mother was still performing. Jenna texted me separately. She said she'd heard the podcast. She was quiet for a long time, and then she said she was sorry. She said she'd known for years something wasn't right, that she'd seen the graduation thing, the photos, and felt awful. But she didn't know what to say, that she'd been given things she didn't ask for, and felt guilty about it, and didn't know how to bring it up without making everything worse. I told her it wasn't her fault. I meant it. She was a kid inside that family too. She didn't build the dynamic, she just grew up inside it, the same way I did, only with a different view. We text now. Regularly. She's in cosmetology school and genuinely loves it, and she sends me pictures of color corrections she's proud of, and I send her memes about working weekend shifts, and it's something. It's real, which is more than what most of what we had before was. I'm 24 now. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment in the Montrose neighborhood of Houston that has a window in the kitchen. I specifically chose the apartment because it faces east, and in the morning the light comes in at an angle that makes the whole room look like something. I have that diploma on the wall. I have Miso, who is enormous and opinionated, and once knocked an entire glass of water onto my laptop to get my attention, which worked. I have Iris, who lives across town and texts me complaining about her commute, and a group of nurses I work with who I would genuinely call my people. The first time in my life I've had a group I could say that about. My parents and I talk sometimes. Christmas. The occasional birthday text that arrives a day late. Last spring my mother sent me a card. It said, "Thinking of you, love mom and dad," and there was nothing else inside it, no note, no message, just that printed sentiment and their signatures. I put it on my refrigerator under a magnet from a state I've never been to. I'm not sure why. Maybe because it was something. Maybe because I'm still learning to take the small things at face value and not wait for them to cost me. I don't know what my family and I are going to become. I'm open to something real if it ever arrives with honesty in it. I'm not holding my breath, and I'm not holding a grudge either. I just stopped holding myself responsible for the fact that they couldn't see me. Here's what I know now. In that pediatric unit, I have sat next to scared kids who don't have the words for what's wrong. And I have learned to stay steady and be present in a way that tells them they are not alone in it. I don't think that came from nowhere. I think it came from spending 20 years paying close attention to what people need when they're being overlooked. Because I was doing that research in my own house, on myself, without knowing that's what I was doing. The hardest part of all of it wasn't any single moment. Not the graduation, not the tax forms, not the Facebook post. The hardest part was the years I spent shrinking down, making myself easier to miss, so that I wouldn't have to feel the particular humiliation of trying to be seen and failing, getting big again, taking up my actual space. Believing that what I'd built was worth being proud of, even when the people who were supposed to tell me that first still hadn't said the words. That's the part that took everything I had. If you're the one who learned to go quiet in a house that was loud for someone else, I want you to know I see you. You are not too much. You are not the problem. You were just in the wrong audience, and you deserve one that actually shows up. Mine is still being built, but it's mine, and I chose every person in it, and that turns out to be the kind of thing nobody can photograph away from you.